I didn't even see it coming. One moment I was setting my last quarter down on the table, ready to pay for my coffee like I had 100 times before, and the next moment a young man's palm exploded against my cheek with a crack that echoed through the diner. My head snapped sideways, my skin stung hot, and for a moment it felt like every pair of eyes in that room drilled into me, waiting to see what the old man would do. My cheek burned, but it wasn't the pain that stayed with me, it was the silence that followed. Forks froze midair, cups hovered above saucers. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone's phones, however, came out. Screens lit up, cameras raised, recording what they thought was about to become another viral clip of an old fool getting put in his place. I touched my face gently. I could feel the sting of the slap and the tiny cut where his ring had split my skin. My hand didn't shake. Not then, not ever. I'd been trained long ago to steady myself no matter the storm. And in that silence, I straightened my back, looked him in the eye, and said only 6 words. You just made a big mistake. The boy, though he wasn't really a boy, he was in his 30s but carried himself with the immaturity of a teenager, laughed. A big, hollow laugh. He wanted the crowd to hear him. He wanted to humiliate me publicly. Yeah? What are you going to do about it, Grandpa? Call your nurse? Or maybe your mommy? That was Brad Morrison. Tall, broad shoulders, expensive boots and an even more expensive watch that he liked to flash every chance he got. I'd seen him in Murphy's Diner before, always loud, always smug, always treating waitresses like they were beneath him. But this morning he had chosen me. An old man sipping coffee alone. An easy target. I reached into my cardigan pocket. The diner went completely silent again. Maybe some thought I was reaching for a weapon. I wasn't. I pulled out my phone and pressed a single number on speed dial. The call connected on speaker. A calm, deep voice answered immediately. Dad? Are you okay? Brad's smirk faltered. People's heads turned toward the phone. They didn't know the voice, but they felt the authority in it. I'm fine, Daniel, I said evenly, my voice clear. But there's been an incident. A pause. Then my son's tone sharpened. Where are you? Do you need agents there right now? I can have a detail arrive in 20 minutes. The diner collectively inhaled. Everyone heard it. Everyone understood that this wasn't some casual voice on the other end of the line. This was a man used to commanding, to acting, to protecting. And that was when Brad realized he hadn't just slapped an old man. He had slapped the father of the director of Homeland Security. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand how we got here. For 3 years straight, I'd gone to Murphy's Diner every Tuesday morning. Same time, 7:30 sharp. Same order, black coffee, wheat toast. Same booth, back against the wall, eyes on the exits. Old habits. Military habits. People thought I was just set in my ways, but there's a reason I live the way I do. The town of Millbrook isn't big. Just under 4,000 people. The kind of place where everyone says they know everyone, though in reality they only know what they want to know. You keep to yourself, the world lets you fade into the wallpaper. That suited me fine. After years of service, I didn't need attention. Just peace, routine, and a hot cup of coffee poured by someone who remembered my name. Maria Santos, the waitress, always greeted me with a smile. She's the kind of person who notices details. She knew without asking that I took my coffee black, that I liked my toast dry, that I stacked the change neatly before paying. Good morning, Mr. Carter, she said that Tuesday, just like every other. The usual? Yes, thank you, Maria. She poured the coffee without asking. No cream, no sugar. I never changed it. She knew. Most of the town probably thought of me as a quiet old man in a navy cardigan. That was fine. I didn't mind being underestimated. I sat with my back to the wall. Always. Old training. Never sit where you can't see the exits. Always know your surroundings. My hands might tremble a little when I text, but my eyes are sharp, my instincts sharper. Some habits are for life. That morning, my phone buzzed. A text from my son. Big cabinet meeting today. Wish me luck. Love you, Dad. I smiled. My fingers moved slower than they used to, but I typed back. Proud of you. Be safe. I tucked the phone away and sipped my coffee. Simple. Quiet. Peaceful. That's all I wanted. But Brad Morrison didn't like peace. He was already in the diner when I walked in, sitting in his usual booth, boots on the seat across from him, phone in his hand, scrolling and smirking. He didn't order much, eggs and bacon, coffee drowned in cream and sugar. But he made sure his presence was known. Loud greetings, louder complaints, and comments that always carried just enough edge to make people uncomfortable. I'd seen the way he looked at me before. With irritation. With disdain. Maybe he didn't like that I always came in, neat and punctual. Maybe my quiet presence rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe he simply hated the sight of someone old, a reminder that one day time would take him, too. That morning, he muttered to his breakfast companion just loud enough for the rest of us to hear. Why do they let that old fossil sit here every week like he owns the place? Makes me lose my appetite. The man with him shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, glanced up from her paper and frowned. Rodriguez, the fire chief, cleared his throat but went back to his eggs. Nobody said anything. They never did. Maria caught my eye as she passed my table. Her jaw was tight. She'd heard it too. She always did. But she had bills to pay, and Brad tipped well. Money spoke louder than dignity in towns like ours. I kept sipping my coffee. I'd faced worse insults. I'd stood in worse company. And at 78 years old, I didn't need to prove anything to men like Brad Morrison. Or so I thought. Across the street, a college kid named Tommy Carter, no relation to me, was setting up camera gear for a class project. He wanted to capture small-town America. Murphy's Diner looked like the perfect backdrop. Timeless, authentic. He thought he'd be filming friendly farmers and gossiping neighbors. He had no idea his footage would become evidence in a federal investigation. The diner had its own security cameras too. The owner installed them after a rash of petty thefts. Nobody expected they'd end up capturing something far more important. At 7:45 a.m., Brad Morrison pushed his half-empty plate aside and leaned back in his booth, watching me like a predator watches prey. 15 minutes of me quietly enjoying my toast had apparently been too much for him to stomach. He stood up. The sound of his boots on the linoleum floor was heavy, deliberate. He wanted attention. He wanted witnesses. And he got them. Every eye turned as he walked toward me. His shadow fell across my table. I looked up calmly, meeting his eyes. "Morning," I said. "You seem real comfortable here," he said. "Just having coffee." Real comfortable for someone who doesn't belong. The diner went still. Forks lowered. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably. Maria's hand slipped into her apron pocket, where I knew her phone was. "I'm sorry if I bothered you," I said evenly. "You being here bothers me. It bothers decent folks." He leaned closer, invading my space. His breath smelled of cheap coffee and arrogance. I reached for my wallet, ready to leave quietly. But before I could stand, his hand slammed down on the table. The impact made my coffee cup jump, slosh, and topple. Dark liquid spread across the table, dripping to the floor. My coins scattered, rolling and clinking across the diner floor. "Don't walk away when I'm talking to you," he growled. I stood slowly, my knees creaking but my back straight. "Old, yes. Weak, no. I don't want trouble," I said quietly. "Trouble?" He laughed. "You are trouble, old man. Always sitting here, acting like you're somebody. You think anyone cares about you?" I could feel every eye on me. Rodriguez had half risen from his seat, torn between stepping in and holding back. Mrs. Patterson's lips moved like she was whispering a prayer. Maria had her phone out now, recording. "Please," I said, "let me pass." "Not until I say you can." He shifted sideways, blocking my path. I moved left. He moved left. I moved right. He mirrored me. His face red, his voice rising. "You don't get to walk away. Not today." Then he shoved me. Hard. My hip hit the table edge, pain shooting up my side. Cups and plates crashed to the floor. At 78, a shove can mean a broken hip, a fractured rib. But I held my footing. Barely. Rodriguez barked, "That's enough, Brad." But Brad wasn't listening. The shove had lit something inside him. He liked the power. He liked the crowd watching. He wanted to finish the show. And then came the slap. His hand cracked across my face, sharp and loud. My head snapped sideways. My cheek burned hot, blood trickled from a cut where his ring had caught me. The diner gasped in unison. Maria cried out. Rodriguez took a step forward. Mrs. Patterson covered her mouth. I raised a hand to my cheek, steady. My shoulders squared, my spine straightened. And I looked at him with calm, unwavering eyes. "You just made a big mistake." His smirk widened when he slapped me, but the silence that followed wasn't the reaction he wanted. He expected laughter, approval, maybe even applause. Instead, the diner froze. The only sound was the faint hum of the old ceiling fan and the drip of spilled coffee hitting the floor. I touched my cheek where the sting still lingered, and when I pulled my hand away, there was blood on my fingertips. A thin line, where his gaudy ring had torn the skin. Brad leaned in close, grinning. "What's the matter, old man? You gonna cry? You gonna fall over? Go on, fall. Let everyone see what you're really made of." I straightened my shoulders. My back might ache, my knees might be stiff, but I've faced worse than this. Combat zones, cold nights, empty fields where silence meant death. Compared to that, this was just noise. I looked him in the eye and repeated, "Steady, you just made a big mistake." The laugh he gave was forced now. Too loud, too sharp, like he needed the sound to cover his nerves. "Yeah? What are you gonna do? Call your mommy? You're nothing but a relic. Your time's over." And that's when I reached into my pocket. A couple of people in the diner flinched. Maybe they thought I carried something more dangerous than an old smartphone. I didn't. I pulled out the phone, unlocked it with my thumb, and pressed one number. Brad barked a laugh. "What, you calling bingo night to complain? Who's gonna save you?" The phone clicked, and the voice of my son filled the silence. "Dad? Are you all right?" Brad's smile faltered. Around the diner, eyes darted between me, the phone, and him. "I'm fine, Daniel," I said, calm as ever. "But there's been an incident." I left the call on speaker. My son's voice carried authority. "Wait, the kind of tone you don't learn, you earn. Where are you, Dad? What happened?" The whole diner heard him. Maria froze mid-step, her phone still pointed at us, recording. Rodriguez tilted his head like he'd just recognized the voice. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened above her paper. Brad tried to laugh again, but it came out weak, shaky. "Who's that?" "Your doctor. Your grandson." Daniel's voice cut through him. "Dad, are you hurt? Do I need to send agents right now? I can have a detail on site in 20 minutes. The words hit the room like thunder. Agents. Detail. Homeland Security. Everyone understood immediately. I saw it happen, the shift in the room. From pity for an old man to fear of the power behind him. Phone's recording turned shakier, whispers broke out, and Brad Morrison's face drained of color. "Agents," he muttered under his breath. I kept my eyes on him. The man who just assaulted me is named Brad Morrison. It's all been recorded. Gasps rippled through the diner. Maria's Instagram live comments exploded, her numbers climbing by the second. Rodriguez muttered under his breath, "Christ, Brad. Do you know what you just did?" Brad raised his hands slightly, his voice breaking. Wait, this was a misunderstanding. Just a little roughhousing. No harm done, right? Right? But there was harm. Everyone could see it. My cheek was red and swelling. Blood trickled slowly from the cut. And worse than that was the humiliation, the deliberate, public humiliation of a man he thought was powerless. I held up the phone, steady. "Daniel, you heard that?" "Yes," he said, voice cold now. "I heard everything. Stay where you are, Dad. I'll handle this." Brad's head jerked from me to the crowd. No, come on, folks, you know me. I didn't mean it. You know I was just. Just what? Rodriguez interrupted, stepping forward. Just bullying an old man? Just slapping him in front of the whole town? Mrs. Patterson whispered, the director's father. Maria's live stream viewer count ticked upward, hundreds, then thousands. People watching live, spreading it already. Brad swallowed hard. His tough guy act was crumbling. The smirk gone, the swagger gone, all that remained was a sweating man realizing he'd stepped on a landmine. I didn't know, he stammered. I didn't know who your son was. I looked him straight in the eye. And if you had, you wouldn't have hit me. But it was fine to do when you thought I was just some old man with no one to call. The truth of it hung in the air like smoke. The phones caught every word, every tremor in his voice, every ounce of steady calm in mine. Daniel's voice carried from the phone, clear and commanding. Dad, I'm dispatching protective detail to your location. Stay inside. And I want names of all witnesses. This is going to the federal level. The room erupted in murmurs. Federal level. Brad's knees seemed to weaken. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his hands trembling now. I'm sorry, he whispered, but it was too late. Because the world was already watching. That's how it began. With one slap. One act of arrogance. He thought he was showing strength. What he showed was weakness, because true strength doesn't come from humiliating the vulnerable. It comes from standing tall when you're underestimated. I should have been just another nameless old man to him. That's what he thought. But instead, I became the man who revealed who he really was. Phones kept recording. Maria kept live streaming. Tommy's camera outside caught every second from another angle. The diner's own security system recorded in high definition. There was no escaping the truth now. Rodriguez turned to me. Mr. Carter, I'll stand as witness. I saw everything. Maria's voice shook as she said, I've got it all on video. Every word, every shove, every slap. Even Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, raised her trembling hand. I'll testify. Enough is enough. Brad looked around desperately. His allies were silent. The townsfolk who usually laughed at his jokes, who tolerated his swagger, were avoiding his eyes. His show of dominance had collapsed into shame. And me? I stood steady. Cheek burning, hip aching, but dignity intact. I had served my country, buried friends, endured worse than this. I wasn't going to crumble in front of him. Daniel's voice came through the phone once more, firm. Dad, listen carefully. Do not leave that diner until federal agents arrive. We'll take it from here. And as I stood there, surrounded by silence, I realized this was only the beginning. Because Brad Morrison hadn't just slapped me. He had woken up an entire system that would now turn its eyes on Millbrook. And the small-town bully was about to learn what real power looked like. The diner emptied faster than I had ever seen it. Within 10 minutes of the slap, people who had been frozen in their booths were paying bills, hurrying out the door, whispering into phones. But not all of them left. Maria stayed by my side, her phone still recording. Rodriguez lingered near the door, arms folded, eyes never leaving Brad. Mrs. Patterson, pale and trembling, sat stiff in her chair, her paper untouched. Brad himself had sunk into a booth, sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked smaller now. Not physically, he was still broad and strong, but smaller in presence. Like a balloon that had lost its air. I sat back down, carefully, my hip still throbbing from the shove. Maria dabbed at the blood on my cheek with a napkin. "Mr. Carter, you need a doctor." "I've had worse," I said quietly. She gave me a look. "That doesn't make this okay." The whole time, my phone stayed on the table, speaker on. Daniel hadn't hung up. He was listening, maybe even recording from his end. "Dad," he said, calm but sharp, "stay seated. I'm sending federal agents to secure the scene. I want you safe until they arrive." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Brad's voice broke the silence. "Look. I lost my temper, okay? It happens. Everyone here knows me. I didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't mean anything?" Maria snapped. "You shoved him. You slapped him. You humiliated him in front of the whole town. You call that nothing?" Brad glared at her, but the old confidence wasn't there. "I was just teaching him respect. That's all." Rodriguez took a step closer, his firefighter's frame filling the space. "Respect? That's what you call it? You call assaulting a 78-year-old man respect?" Brad's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around the diner, desperate for support. None came. The silence said everything. Outside, Tommy Carter was still filming. He hadn't expected to capture a civil rights flashpoint that morning. His hands shook as he checked his footage, realizing what he had. Clear audio, clear video. The kind of footage news stations would pay for, the kind of footage that could change lives, or ruin them. And then Maria's live stream started exploding. Her follower count had been modest before. A few hundred locals, friends, cousins. But within minutes of the slap, the viewer count jumped to thousands. The comments scrolled faster than she could read. "Did that guy just hit an old man? Wait, is that the Homeland Security Director's dad? Somebody tag CNN." It was already out of her control. The internet had picked it up. Screenshots, clips, hashtags. In the time it took me to breathe, the story was spreading. 20 minutes later, the bell above the diner door jingled. Sheriff Patricia Hayes walked in, her body camera already rolling. She was a tall woman, mid-40s, the kind who liked to act tougher than she was. She scanned the scene, me with a bloodied cheek, Maria with her phone, Rodriguez standing tall, Brad hunched in his booth. "Morning, folks," she said, too casual. "I hear there's been some kind of incident." Maria stepped forward before I could. "Sheriff, Brad Morrison assaulted Mr. Carter. I got the whole thing on video." Hayes frowned, holding out her hand. "Let me see that." Maria hesitated. "I'll show you, but I'm not giving you my phone." Hayes' jaw tightened, but she played it off. She watched the footage, her face growing stiffer by the second. By the time the slap echoed from Maria's phone, the sheriff's lips were pressed into a thin line. "Brad," she said finally, "I'm going to need a statement from you." "Sheriff," he said quickly, "this was just a misunderstanding. Got a little heated, that's all. No big deal." "No big deal?" Maria barked. "You assaulted him in front of half the town." Hayes held up her hand. "That's enough. Everyone calm down." She turned to me. "Mr. Carter, do you want to press charges?" I looked her straight in the eye. "I want this documented properly. Whatever happens next, it should follow the law." Her eyes flickered. Something unreadable passed across her face, calculation, hesitation. I'd seen that look before, on politicians and officers who cared more about fallout than truth. "All right," she said finally, scribbling in her notebook. "Investigation ongoing. All parties cooperating." That was it. No handcuffs. No orders. Just words meant to buy time. But time wasn't on her side. Because by the time Hayes left the diner, news vans were already rolling into Millbrook. Tommy's footage had hit YouTube, Maria's live stream had been clipped and shared across Twitter, and the hashtag Respect Our Elders was trending regionally. Local radio broke its programming with an incident report from Murphy's Diner. Some stations tried to play it down, calling it a disagreement between residents. Others leaned into the drama. Local man assaults elderly veteran, footage goes viral. And it wasn't just local anymore. Reporters from regional outlets were on the phone within an hour. By noon, national journalists were sniffing around. They'd all seen the clip. They'd all heard Daniel's voice. The town was about to become a stage. And I, whether I wanted it or not, was the centerpiece. Back at home, I sat quietly in my kitchen, an ice pack pressed to my cheek. Maria had driven me. She insisted I not walk back alone. She hovered like a daughter would, checking my hip, refilling my water glass, scolding me gently when I said I was fine. "You're not fine," she said. "You were assaulted. In front of everybody." "I've faced worse," I said again, but softer this time. "Maybe. But you shouldn't have to face this. Not here. Not in your own town." Her words sank into me like cold water. Because she was right. After everything I had done in my life, all the years of service, all the sacrifices, I had come back home expecting peace. And instead I'd been humiliated by a man who couldn't see past my age. The sting wasn't just on my cheek. It was in my pride. And as much as I told myself I could take it, deep down I knew this wasn't going away quietly. Meanwhile, Brad was scrambling. His lawyer had been called. His friends were whispering behind closed doors. Some defended him, calling it a misunderstanding, an exaggeration. Others were already distancing themselves, smelling the smoke of a fire about to spread. By evening, he'd released a statement to the local paper. "I sincerely regret any misunderstanding that occurred this morning. Mr. Carter is a respected member of our community. Sometimes tensions rise, and words get taken out of context. No mention of the slap. No mention of the video. No apology." The statement only made things worse. Online, people tore it apart. A misunderstanding? That was assault. He literally slapped him. What context? This is pathetic. The town was dividing. Some stood with me, outraged, ready to demand justice. Others rallied behind Brad, claiming it was being blown out of proportion by outsiders. And me? I sat in my quiet kitchen, holding an ice pack, wondering how a single slap could pull apart the seams of a whole community. But I also knew this: Brad Morrison thought he had silenced me. He thought he had humiliated an old man into submission. Instead, he had lit a fire. And the flames were only beginning to spread. By the next morning, I wasn't just an old man in a cardigan. I was a headline. Elderly veteran assaulted in small-town diner. Bully targets senior, didn't know his son runs Homeland Security. Respect our elders, viral video sparks outrage. I sat at my kitchen table, toast untouched, coffee going cold, staring at the screen of Maria's phone. She'd come over early to check on me, and together we watched as her live stream replayed across national networks. Clips of the slap, my calm words, Daniel's voice on the phone, all of it looped on television, shared in social feeds, dissected by commentators who'd never once set foot in Millbrook. "Look at this," Maria said, scrolling. "It's already at 500,000 views." She showed me the comments. Some were supportive. "What kind of coward hits a 78-year-old man?" Others were angry. "This isn't just about age, it's about respect. Period." But mixed in were darker voices. "Bet the old guy exaggerated. He probably provoked it. Deep state propaganda. Don't believe everything you see." I leaned back slowly. "It's starting already." Maria frowned. "What is?" "The split. Half the country will see this for what it was, bullying, plain and simple. The other half will twist it, excuse it, deny it. Truth doesn't stay clean when politics get involved. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She'd already seen the comment sections. By noon, the first satellite trucks rolled into town. Local reporters shoved microphones into the faces of anyone who'd been in the diner. Some spoke out, trembling but determined. Others waved them off, eyes darting nervously. Rodriguez gave a short statement. I was there. I saw everything. Mr. Carter didn't provoke anyone. He was attacked, plain and simple. Mrs. Patterson surprised everyone by stepping forward. My husband is the mayor, but I won't stay silent. What happened in that diner was wrong. And we can't just brush it under the rug. Her words rippled like an earthquake. If the mayor's wife was willing to speak against Brad, the town's fragile silence was cracking. Brad, meanwhile, avoided the cameras. His lawyer released another statement, longer this time. Mr. Morrison deeply regrets that yesterday's encounter has been misrepresented. He values the elders of our community and has always supported them. We caution against rushing to judgment before all facts are known. The statement fell flat. The videos spoke louder. That afternoon, Sheriff Hayes knocked on my door. She came alone, no body camera this time. Mr. Carter, she began, shifting on my porch, this has gotten bigger than expected. The town's under a microscope now. Businesses are nervous. Property values. I cut her off. Are you here to talk about property values? Or about the fact that a man assaulted me in public? She sighed. You have to understand the pressure I'm under. The mayor's phones won't stop ringing. People are worried this will ruin Millbrook's reputation. I looked her straight in the eye. Millbrook's reputation was ruined the moment a grown man decided it was acceptable to humiliate someone because of their age. Don't blame the cameras for capturing it. Blame the hand that struck me. Her lips tightened. If this goes federal, the whole town could pay the price. Maybe it's time it did, I said. She didn't answer. She left, shoulders stiff, frustration heavy in her footsteps. By evening, the national anchors had picked it up. I watched from my living room as strangers debated my life on split screens. Clearly, this was elder abuse, one said. Or was it? Another countered. We only see a clip. Context matters. Context, the first replied. The man was slapped across the face. That's context enough. I muted the television. Hearing them talk about me like I was a case study felt hollow. They didn't know me. They didn't know the years I carried, the medals tucked in my drawer, the memories that still haunted my sleep. To them, I was just the old man from the diner. But I wasn't nameless. I was a father. A veteran. A man who'd built his life on quiet dignity. And now that dignity had been dragged into the spotlight. The phone rang constantly. Old friends checking in. Strangers offering support. Some calls were less kind. You made this town look weak, one voice snarled before hanging up. You should have taken it like a man, another hissed. I set the phone down slowly. The words stung, not because they were true, they weren't, but because they revealed something ugly. Some people weren't angry at Brad for hitting me. They were angry at me for not staying silent. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, my Purple Heart medal on the table in front of me. I ran my fingers over it, remembering nights and places far from home, remembering men younger than Brad who had shown courage he couldn't imagine. And I asked myself, was I ready for another battle? The next morning, Daniel called. His voice was clipped, professional, but underneath it was something only a son can feel. Dad, I've authorized a protective detail for you. 2 agents will be stationed nearby. They'll keep watch until this is resolved. I sighed. I never wanted this kind of attention, son. I know. But it's not just about you anymore. This is bigger now. People are watching how we handle it. And if I've learned anything in this job, it's that bullies thrive when people look away. You taught me that when I was a kid. Don't forget it now. His words sank deep. He was right. Years ago, I'd told him that bullies only stop when someone stands up. And now here I was, faced with a choice: stay quiet for comfort, or endure the storm so others might find courage. Meanwhile, Millbrook itself was splitting in two. On one side were those who stood with me. Veterans groups, church leaders, Maria, and her growing online following. They said it wasn't about politics, it was about decency. On the other side were Brad's defenders. Local businessmen, some politicians, Facebook groups that claimed outsiders were exaggerating a minor dispute. They said the town was under attack by cancel culture. The diner became a battlefield online. Review pages flooded with one-star reviews and messages of support, clashing like soldiers in the digital trenches. And through it all, my name kept trending. My face, swollen cheek and all, kept appearing on screens I never asked for. One afternoon, Maria came over with her laptop. "You need to see this," she said. She pulled up a clip from a regional news station. It showed Brad, finally speaking on camera. He looked tired, his bravado cracked, but he still tried to spin the story. "I didn't assault anyone," he insisted. "It was just a misunderstanding. This whole thing's been blown out of proportion by people who don't understand our town." The anchor pressed him. "But the video shows you striking Mr. Carter." Brad shifted, eyes darting. "Videos can be misleading. People don't see the whole picture. He provoked me." Maria slammed the laptop shut. "Provoked him? You sat there in silence, Mr. Carter. You didn't provoke anyone." I sat back, breathing slowly. That's the oldest trick in the book. Blame the victim. If they can't deny the act, they question the circumstances. She looked at me, fire in her eyes. "Are you ready to fight back?" I nodded slowly. "Not just for me. For every old man who's been told to stay quiet. For every person who's been humiliated because someone else thought they were powerless." By the end of that week, the FBI had called Daniel's office. Civil rights investigators were reviewing the footage. Federal attention was no longer just a threat, it was real. Millbrook's quiet Tuesday morning had become a matter for Washington. And I, the old man who just wanted coffee and toast, was about to be dragged deeper into the storm. The first black SUVs rolled into Millbrook 3 days after the slap. They weren't flashy, but to anyone who knew what to look for, they carried weight. Federal plates. Dark windows. Men and women in suits who moved with the kind of awareness that comes from years of training. The diner owner stood outside wringing his hands as they went in, copying hard drives, securing footage, collecting every angle of that morning. Maria handed over her phone files willingly, Rodriguez provided his testimony without hesitation, and even Mrs. Patterson offered her written account. Me? I sat quietly at my kitchen table, watching through the window as one of the vehicles idled across the street. A protective detail, Daniel had promised. "For your safety," he said. But their presence reminded me of something else. I wasn't invisible anymore. My quiet life had been shattered. Neighbors slowed their cars when they drove by. Some waved. Others just stared. A few turned their heads quickly, as if acknowledging me might bring trouble their way. Maria stopped by every morning with coffee. She tried to keep her tone light, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "They say the video's past 1 million views now," she told me one morning. 1 million, I repeated, shaking my head. I didn't think 1 million people would ever know my name. "Now they do," she said softly. "And they're watching what happens next." The town itself was unraveling. At the barbershop, old men argued loudly, some furious at Brad, others saying I had brought federal eyes onto Millbrook. At the grocery store, people whispered when I passed by. Some offered quiet words of support. Others turned down the next aisle to avoid me. On local Facebook groups, the divide was vicious. "We stand with Mr. Carter. Respect our elders. This whole thing's a setup to make small towns look bad. Don't believe the media hype." Brad's a good man. The truth was, this wasn't about one slap anymore. It was about what Millbrook wanted to believe about itself. A slap in a diner had forced everyone to look in the mirror, and many didn't like what they saw. The pressure grew heavier when anonymous notes started appearing in my mailbox. Keep your mouth shut, old man. Your boy can't protect you forever. Accidents happen. One morning I walked outside to find my garbage scattered across the lawn, every bag ripped open. Another morning, someone had spray-painted "Get Out" in red across my garage door. I stood there, staring at it, ice settling into my stomach. For the first time, I felt the weight of fear pressing down. Not for myself, I'd lived long enough not to fear bullies. But for Maria, for Rodriguez, for the witnesses who had spoken up. They didn't have protective details. They didn't have a son in Washington. That night, Daniel called. His voice was tight. We're tracing threats. But Dad, you need to understand something. Once people like this feel cornered, they escalate. They'll try to scare you into silence. That's how bullies survive. I'm not afraid for myself, I admitted. I'm afraid for them. Maria. Rodriguez. Even Mrs. Patterson. They don't have shields. Then we'll be their shields, he said firmly. The investigation dug deeper. Federal agents didn't just look at the slap. They started pulling records, files, complaints. And what they found painted a picture uglier than anyone wanted to admit. It turned out Brad Morrison wasn't new to this kind of behavior. He'd had altercations before, shouting matches, intimidation, even pushing matches, but they'd always been written off as misunderstandings. Reports filed, then quietly buried. Worse, there were patterns across the whole town. Minority families questioned about whether they belonged at public events. Elderly residents brushed aside when they complained about mistreatment. College students harassed late at night. Every file told the same story: intimidation, humiliation, silence. The agents spread the evidence across long tables at the sheriff's department. When I was invited to see it, my stomach turned. Page after page, face after face, all dismissed until now. This isn't just about you, sir, Agent Sarah Carter explained. This is systemic. Your case is the spark, but it's connected to a much larger fire. I nodded slowly. I thought I was just a man who got slapped. Turns out I'm the tip of the iceberg. Exactly, she said. But the bigger the fire grew, the more dangerous the smoke became. Maria started receiving threats online. Fake accounts called her names, spread rumors about her immigration status, shared her home address. Tommy Carter, the college kid who filmed from outside, had his email hacked. His professors started receiving racist memes sent from his account. His grades were leaked online. It was coordinated. Organized. Someone with resources didn't want the truth out. I sat in my living room late one night, the blinds drawn, phone buzzing with another anonymous call full of heavy breathing and whispered threats. My hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. I had survived war zones, carried friends to safety under fire, endured nights of despair that would break most men. And yet here, in my own hometown, I was being terrorized for daring to stand tall after being humiliated. That realization settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about whether Millbrook, and maybe America, would let bullies dictate the truth. Then came the first crack of light. A knock on my door. When I opened it, I found Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a civil rights attorney, standing there with a folder in her hand. Beside her was a younger man with cropped hair and sharp eyes who introduced himself simply, Marcus. Army veteran. Cybersecurity. Dr. Martinez smiled gently. We're here because we believe you're not just a victim, Mr. Carter. You're the start of something that needs to change. And we'd like to help. I studied them carefully. They weren't part of the federal detail, not part of Daniel's world. They were volunteers. Allies. People who had seen enough injustice to know when it was time to step forward. For the first time since that slap, I felt a flicker of hope. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Maria, Rodriguez, Mrs. Patterson, and my new allies. Papers spread across the wood, laptops glowing. "This isn't just about Brad anymore," Dr. Martinez explained. "It's about the system that let him thrive. The sheriff who looked away. The mayor who buried complaints. The businessmen who funded intimidation." Rodriguez rubbed his temples. "You're saying this goes all the way up?" Marcus tapped his laptop. "I've already recovered deleted files. Emails, group chats, financial records. They were sloppy. The evidence is there. They coordinated." Maria's eyes widened. "So this wasn't random. It was deliberate." Marcus nodded grimly. "Deliberate and profitable. They've been using intimidation to push families out, lower property values, buy up land cheap. Brad's just the blunt instrument." The room went silent. We had all felt it in pieces, but seeing it laid out in black and white made it undeniable. And for me, the realization was sharp as a blade. That slap wasn't just personal humiliation. It was part of a machine. And the only way to stop it was to expose the whole thing. The night we gathered in my kitchen, the air felt heavier than it should have. Papers stacked on the table, laptops open, voices hushed but urgent. We weren't plotting revenge, we were struggling for truth. And we knew truth had enemies. Marcus leaned back from his laptop with a grim smile. "I've seen this before. Files deleted, cameras mysteriously offline, servers crashing at the exact moment evidence is being copied. They're panicking. And panic makes people sloppy." "What did you find?" I asked. "Enough," he said simply, and turned his screen toward me. There it was, email chains between business leaders, phrases like maintaining community standards and ensuring demographic stability. Polite words covering ugly intent. But then, deeper down in private chats, the masks slipped. Time to remind them of their place. "Old man acts like he owns the diner, he needs a lesson." Maria covered her mouth. "They planned it. They planned to make an example out of you." I felt the weight of that revelation in my bones. My humiliation hadn't just been spontaneous cruelty, it had been part of a pattern, a strategy. They chose me because I was old, because I looked defenseless, because they thought I would fold. "They miscalculated," I whispered. The backlash came almost immediately. The very next morning, Murphy's Diner's security system mysteriously failed. "Catastrophic error," the owner muttered, shaking his head. "All files gone." But Marcus only smirked. They forgot about cloud backup. Amateurs. Within hours, he had retrieved every frame. Then the sheriff's office reported an accidental deletion of case files. Months of complaints from minority families, elderly residents, anyone who had spoken up, all gone. Or so they thought. Marcus dug deeper and found archived copies, time-stamped and untouched. It was a game of shadows. Every time they tried to bury the truth, more evidence surfaced. But with each revelation, the threats intensified. Maria's phone buzzed constantly with anonymous texts. "Immigration can be a nightmare. Your work schedule is online. Careful walking home." Rodriguez found his truck tires slashed outside the fire station. A note taped to the windshield read, "Mind your own business." And me? I woke to find the word traitor spray painted across my fence in thick black letters. That night, as I scrubbed it off under the dim porch light, my hands shook, not from fear, but from anger. After all I had given, after all the years of service, this was my thanks? To be treated like an enemy in my own hometown? I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had carried rifles, that had steadied younger soldiers, that had saluted fallen brothers. They weren't trembling from weakness. They were trembling because I refused to let this stand. Daniel called that evening. His voice was harder than before. "Dad, you need to take this seriously. We've confirmed threats from organized groups. Not just local. Coordinated." "I am taking it seriously," I said. "But I'm not backing down." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You sound like the man who raised me." That made me smile. I don't know how to be anyone else. The town itself was boiling. Two camps had formed, clear as day. On one side were people marching with handmade signs that read "Respect our elders," standing outside City Hall, chanting for justice. Maria spoke at one of the rallies, her voice trembling at first but growing strong as she said, "If they can slap one old man and get away with it, what does that say about all of us?" On the other side were counter-rallies, folks waving signs that read "Save our community" and chanting about outside interference. Brad himself showed up once, standing in the back, nodding as others shouted that he was the victim of a smear campaign. The tension thickened with every passing day. Fists clenched in grocery store aisles. Arguments broke out at church picnics. Lifelong neighbors stopped talking. And in the middle of it all was me, the man who just wanted coffee and toast on a Tuesday morning. One night, I sat alone in my kitchen after everyone had gone. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. On the table in front of me was my Purple Heart, the medal I rarely looked at anymore. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm, and whispered to the empty room, "I didn't fight for silence. I didn't fight for cowardice. I fought for dignity." Tears stung my eyes, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of it all. At my age, I thought my battles were over. I thought I'd earned peace. Instead, I was back in the fight. Only this time, the battlefield wasn't overseas. It was right here, in my own backyard. And then, as if the universe knew I needed reminding, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Just 5 words, "You taught me to stand." I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and set the medal back down. I would stand again. The next day, reinforcements arrived, not in uniform, but in spirit. Veterans from nearby towns drove in, some with canes, some in wheelchairs, some wearing faded jackets covered in patches. They came to my door, saluted, and said, "We've got your back." Local church leaders joined the cause, standing beside Maria, calling for truth and reconciliation. Even Rabbi Miller from the next county came, holding a sign that read "Dignity has no age." It wasn't just me anymore. It was a movement. And though the threats kept coming, though the fear lingered, I felt stronger than I had in years. Because I wasn't just an old man who got slapped. I was a voice. And my voice had awakened others. That night, I gathered everyone again: Maria, Rodriguez, Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Martinez, Marcus, and the veterans who'd shown up. We crowded into my small living room, filling it with determination. "They tried to silence us," I said. "They failed. They tried to bury the truth. We dug it back up. They tried to scare us. But we're still here." I paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air. This isn't about me anymore. It's about what kind of town we want Millbrook to be. What kind of country we want to live in. Do we bow to bullies? Or do we demand dignity? Maria's eyes shone with tears. Rodriguez nodded firmly. Mrs. Patterson whispered, "It's time." And in that small room, surrounded by unlikely allies, I felt something powerful. Something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The night before the town hall meeting, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching headlights sweep across the dark street as cars passed, agents parked nearby keeping their quiet vigil. On the table before me lay the evidence, pages of emails, testimonies, recordings, all gathered piece by Marcus, Dr. Martinez, and our small band of unlikely allies. It was enough to expose everything. Enough to show that Brad Morrison's slap was not an accident, not a temper flare, but the symptom of a disease that had rotted Millbrook from the inside. Still, my hands trembled as I picked up the folder. Because tomorrow wasn't about paper. Tomorrow was about standing in front of the very people who had pitted me, mocked me, ignored me, and deciding once and for all who I was, just an old man past his time, or a man who refused to bow. The town hall was packed the next evening. Folding chairs lined every corner, people spilling into the aisles, reporters elbowing for space near the front. Satellite trucks hummed outside, their dishes aimed skyward. Millbrook had never seen so many cameras, never felt so much tension. Brad arrived first, flanked by his lawyer and a few loyal supporters. He wore a pressed suit, his hair slicked back, but the swagger was gone. His smile twitched at the corners, betraying nerves. Then I walked in, cane steady in my hand, Maria and Rodriguez on either side of me, veterans lining the back walls in quiet solidarity. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones lifted, cameras clicked. The mayor banged a gavel at the podium. Order! Order! We are here to discuss the unfortunate incident that has brought unwanted attention to our town. Unwanted attention? Maria muttered under her breath. Unbelievable. The mayor continued, we ask for civility and restraint as we hear both sides. Mr. Morrison will begin. Brad stepped to the podium, clearing his throat. His voice shook slightly, though he tried to mask it with volume. Ladies and gentlemen, I've lived here my whole life. You know me. You know my family. What happened at Murphy's Diner was a misunderstanding blown wildly out of proportion. I never meant to disrespect Mr. Carter. He provoked me, and I reacted poorly. But I am not the monster the media has made me out to be. Murmurs spread across the room. Some nodded. Others crossed their arms. Reporters scribbled furiously. And let me say this, Brad added, his voice rising. Our town doesn't need outsiders telling us how to live. We don't need federal agents snooping into our business. We handle our own problems. Always have, always will. He stepped back, chin raised, as if he'd delivered a victory. The mayor gestured to me. Mr. Carter, you may respond. I rose slowly, every joint in my body aching, but I stood tall. The room hushed. I walked to the podium, laid my hand on the wood, and looked out at faces, some familiar, some hostile, some sympathetic, all waiting. My name is William Carter, I began. I served this country for decades. I fought in battles most of you only read about in history books. I carried friends home in body bags, and I came back here because I believed Millbrook was a place worth living in. A place of dignity. A place of respect. I paused, let the silence breathe. 3 weeks ago, in Murphy's Diner, I was shoved and slapped. Not because I raised my voice. Not because I threatened anyone. But because I was old. Because Brad Morrison looked at me and saw weakness. He thought humiliating me would earn him laughs. He thought no one would care. He thought I was just an old man who would bow his head and stay silent. I straightened, the sting of that moment still alive in my bones. But here's the thing, dignity doesn't age. Respect doesn't expire. And silence only feeds bullies. The crowd stirred. Maria squeezed her hands together, tears in her eyes. I opened the folder and lifted out a stack of papers. This isn't just about me. This is about a pattern. A system. Complaints buried. Families threatened. Property stolen through intimidation. And I have the evidence. I held the papers high. Marcus stepped forward with a laptop, projecting files onto the wall, emails, chats, bank transfers. Each revelation dropped like a hammer. Gasps filled the room as ugly words lit up the screen. Teach him a lesson. Push them out. Don't worry, the sheriff will cover it. The sheriff, sitting near the back, shifted uncomfortably. This is what has been happening in our town, I said, my voice stronger now. Not just to me. To many. Brad's slap was the spark, but the fire has been burning for years. Brad's lawyer shot to his feet. This is outrageous. These so-called documents could be fake. But Marcus cut him off, voice cold. They've been verified, multiple sources, time-stamped. You can challenge them in court. And you will lose. The room erupted in shouting, some cheering, some protesting. The mayor slammed his gavel, but the tide had turned. In that chaos, I raised my voice above it all. I don't want vengeance. I don't want pity. What I want is simple, accountability. Justice. and a promise that no one in this town, no elder, no family, no student, will ever be humiliated into silence again. The veterans at the back rose to their feet, one by one, saluting. Rodriguez stood with them, Maria beside him, her live stream capturing it all for the world to see. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. The noise was deafening, but inside me there was calm. Because I had said what needed to be said. The fallout was swift. Within days, federal indictments were announced. Brad Morrison was arrested on charges of assault, intimidation, and conspiracy. His allies, businessmen, local officials, even the sheriff, were investigated for corruption and obstruction. The mayor resigned under pressure after his wife's testimony made national headlines. Millbrook was shaken to its core, but for the first time in years, people felt the air clear. Maria's live stream had hit 3 million views. Rodriguez became a local hero for standing his ground. Dr. Martinez led the legal efforts that began rebuilding trust in the system. And me? I returned to Murphy's Diner. The first morning I stepped back inside, the room fell silent. Not from fear, not from pity, this time, from respect. People stood. Some clapped quietly. The owner brought me my coffee without asking, eyes glistening. I sat in my booth, took a slow sip, and felt something warm spread through me. Not pride, not triumph, something gentler. Relief. Maria slid into the booth across from me, smiling. You did it. I shook my head. We did it. Because the truth was, I hadn't stood alone. Every ally, every witness, every person who refused to stay quiet had carried this forward. Later, at home, I sat with Daniel on the porch. He had flown in at last, no longer just a voice on the phone. We watched the sun set over Millbrook, the sky painted in soft gold and purple. You proud of yourself, Dad? He asked, a rare smile tugging at his lips. I chuckled. Proud that I didn't fall over when a fool slapped me? Maybe. But more than that, proud of this town. Proud that enough people decided dignity mattered. He nodded. You know, you taught me that when I was a kid. Stand up to bullies. Never let silence be the answer. I guess you just reminded everyone else too. We sat in silence after that, the crickets chirping, the night settling in. And for the first time since that Tuesday morning, I felt peace. Because it had never been just about me. It was about dignity. About the strength that doesn't fade with age. About reminding the world that respect is not optional. One slap had tried to take that from me. But one stand gave it back to us all.